Okay, we are going to build our Photoshop mockups using the materials that we gathered in our brand building exercises. So to start, we are going to create a new document. We want to make sure this document is 1170 pixels by 1700 pixels. The rest should be pretty straightforward. Resolution doesn't particularly matter as long as we're in RGB color. And I'm going to create our new document. So before we can move any further, we need to bring in the content. Both our logo, a hero image, and the text that we talked about. A couple different ways we can bring this in. If you have a Photoshop image or a PNG or some sort, you can open it and drag it in. If you are from Illustrator and working, you can copy and paste your logo in to create a smart object. Either way though, if you've got your logo, you can click and drag it in from Finder, and that will make it into a smart object. Smart objects are pretty cool. There'll be a little icon here showing you that it's a smart object, but basically we can scale this up and down as we like without losing any quality. We can make this small, then we can make it back big again without losing any quality. So I'm going to just make this a little smaller and put it at the top of our document. I'm also going to bring up the main text that we had put together, and I'm going to create a couple of different objects. I want them to each be individual. I'm going to start with a navigation. You're welcome to use the similar navigation. We'll change this as we go, although that's pretty big. Make this a bit smaller. I'm going to just copy and paste. I've got my one-liner. Oops. Each of these, I'm going to use the text tool just to create a new text object. A little one-line slogan. We've got our paragraph here. This one I'm going to click and drag and put this in a box. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller. I'm also going to get some action for a Get Started button. And finally, a copyright notice for the footer. Also going to add in a hero image for now. We can always put this as a placeholder and put in a different image later. But we've got our main pieces in here now. Also, before I move forward, I want to organize our layers panel a little bit more because this is going to get pretty unwieldy. So I'm going to create a couple of folders and then put everything into the right folder. So I'm going to call this logo and navbar. And I'm going to put the logo and the navigation text into that folder. Going to make a new folder called hero, and that will just be our hero image. I'm going to put that underneath here because I want these to go from top to bottom of the website. Next one is going to be page content. And I'm going to put pretty much everything else except the footer text in there. Make sure I'm not putting these folders within each other. And then the last one, I'm going to create my footer text. Before we go on and add any structure to this page, we're going to add some guides to make sure that we are putting everything in the right place. And to do this, we need to turn on our rulers for starters. If you don't see them, you should see them in the document here. And normally we just make guides by pulling them from the top ruler and then leaving them here. But we're going to make some more specific guides, and we are going to use the rectangular marquee tool to help us do that. Normally this tool you just click and drag and make rectangles, but under this style section here, if you click fixed size, we can actually put in the exact pixel numbers that we want. So this is going to help us make some very specific guides. For starters, let's make a 200 pixel by 200 pixel box, and we are going to make a ruler that is 200 pixels from the top. So you see what I did there is using the marquee, I put it in the top left corner, and then that is a guide for our guide, essentially. When I'm done with that, I'm going to deselect. Next up, I want to put a 15 pixel by 15 pixel box on the left and the right side. Sounds a lot smaller, but it's still a pretty good guide right here. We got 15 pixels there. Got 15 pixels here. Great. Next up, we're going to make a navbar space underneath this top header. I'm actually going to hide some of this stuff right here just so I don't get distracted by that. Let's make a 45 pixel by 45 pixel box, and I'm going to put it right underneath here. and drag a little box down there. So now we've essentially got some breathing room on the left and right hand side. We've got space for the logo. We've got space for our navigation. Next up, we need to add some rows in here because the rest of this is going to be the page content. But we're going to divide it up into a few different rows. We're going to start with a 355 pixel row. That'll be the biggest one, and basically our above the fold row. This is going to be the first content that we want you to see when you land on the website. And from there, I am just going to add 300 pixel rows basically down to the bottom. So from there, I can drag this down to here. I can then move this box down, add another row down, move this one down, and get the last of our rows and deselect. Great. Before we go any farther, I'm going to save our document. Save the document so that it is not lost. I'm going to make sure that it is the default PSD. I'm going to call it website mockup and save it. So next up, what we want to do is bring back the content that we had put and start to put everything where it goes a little bit. I can just start clicking and dragging and moving things around. If that doesn't work for you, then you might need to double check the auto select layer is on. By default, that should be on, and whatever you click, it should just drag to that row. So I'm going to click the logo up here. I'm going to make sure that's in the logo spot and that it fits. I'm going to bring this navbar text into the navbar area. Let's see where else we want these things to go. I'm going to bring this down actually a little bit. I mixed these up a little, but basically this next box is going to be our description. Make this a little bit smaller just so it fits for now. So we've got our logo, we've got our navbar, we've got a hero image, we've got our one-liner and our paragraph description. We've got this empty row that we haven't really talked about yet. We've got a call to action and a button, and then we've got this down in the footer. We need a little bit more text here. This is something we didn't prepare before, but the idea is that we're going to have just 3 different callouts that will link to other places on the website, just main features of the business. So for this one, I'm going to say custom cakes. The other one would be all natural ingredients. And lastly, say special occasions. So just 3 things that are, core tenets of your business. And then I've got my call to action and what will be a button and what will become our footer. So everything is in its place, everything is in its little folder, and I'm going to click save. The next thing we need to do is start to block off some colors. And to do that, we need this color palette that we got from our mood board. So in this example, I'm using this LinkedIn one, and they put together this little mood board that has a color palette here. It's pretty easy. We can just bring this into our document. So I'm just going to click and drag this over. I'm going to make sure it's somewhere visible. And I'm just going to put it on top of my hero image for right now, just so I have easy access and I can see it. Because we're just going to use that as reference, basically. And we're going to block off some colors. So the very first color blocking is going to be for this navbar. I'm going to use my rectangular marquee. I'm going to set it back to normal size. And I'm going to select the space that goes in the navbar here. And I'm going to select my proper folder, because I'm going to be working on the navbar. Be in the navbar folder. So next thing, we want to click this little tiny button here, which is this little half black and white circle. We're going to click create new solid color. It's going to auto fit within that box, and it's going to give you a little eyedropper. I'm going to use a dark color like a gray for that, but it is up to you what color you want to use. Moving on, I'm going to do that a couple more times. So I've got my logo and navbar. I also got to drag it so that it is beneath the logo text or the navbar text, otherwise we couldn't see it. We'll change the color on that in a little bit though. Let's see, next up, page content. I'm going to make a box that is behind our main descriptor here. Same basic process. Solid color. This one I'm going to go more with the pink, I think. I'm going to move it below so it is underneath everything. I'm going to leave this next one white. And And I'm going to add another selector here for this bottom box. New fill color, and let's make this one the green. Wonderful. We just need a few more shapes here before we move on. We're going to put in some placeholder circles right here because these are going to be each kind of feature little boxes. So we're going to go and grab the shape tool, which is probably underneath this line tool, which might take a second to get to. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't have a stroke on and instead has just probably a soft gray fill of some sort. And I'm going to hold down Shift and make sure that it is an even circle. And that looks great. I'm just going to get a couple more of those. Duplicate it. I'm going to move it over. I'm going to duplicate it again. And move one more over. Great, we've got our circles. What else did I say we were going to do at this point? We need a button. We need a button for this getting started here, which I will also use from the shape thing. I'm going to use a rounded rectangle, and I'm just going to draw a nice little rounded rectangle button here. Wonderful. Everything is slowly but surely coming together. One more thing. We were going to add some placeholder circles or shapes on top of our circles. So we're going to build these in CSS later, so the shapes themselves don't particularly matter, but we want something there that is more than just these three circles. For starters, I'm going to select all three of these circles, and using my align controls, I'm going to make sure they're vertically level, and then I'm going to make sure they're distributed horizontally so that they're all even. We're going to come back and clean this up a bit shortly, but I want to start with some shapes. So underneath the rounded rectangle and the ellipse, we've got a custom shape tool. And the only thing that changes here is that you've got this little drop down for little shapes. Now let's just do a heart, and we want to make sure that we can see it. Whoops, I had my previous shape selected, so it turned this one gray. So first I'm going to create my new shape, and I'm going to make sure that that is set to white. Wonderful. I'm going to make sure that it is lined up, centered in this box, or in my circle here, which I can also do using the align tools. I can select both of those, and I'm going to center it. Great. And I'm going to create some copies of this shape so that I can bring it over to my other circles. Again, these are just placeholders for now. We'll put in real shapes later. All right. Could probably do a bit more file layer organization here, but everything's in folders, so we're doing decent. And just to be safe, I'm going to save. Let's see, I'm going to hide my color bars too, because I don't need those visible anymore. Okay, one more step before we refine this all a little bit. The thing that is sticking out most right now is our typography. Our typography is pretty terrible looking because we haven't really done anything about it. We'll go much more in depth into this later on, but there are two types of fonts that we can use on a website. One are called web-safe fonts. I've included a link to read more about those in the description below. Basically, they're safe because they are so standard that they are installed on every computer. Think Arial, think Times New Roman, that sort of thing. They're safe because every machine is going to have them, and no matter what computer they open up on, they will be there to be seen. The other ones are called web-hosted fonts, and those are fonts that are not on every computer, and instead we would load them into the website so that the browser can load them, and they look like the fonts that we have, even if they are not installed on someone's computer. For this exercise, I'm going to use Open Sans as a hosted font that we can get from Google. You can download any font from Google and use it on your computer locally. And then when we build it in Dreamweaver, there will be an option to host that, and there'll be some JavaScript code that we use to make sure that that shows up properly. For now, though, I am going to select and just start going through and changing some of my copy here. So I'm going to make my menu into Open Sans. Let's say Open Sans regular. I'm going to make it a bit smaller so that it is a menu. And I'm going to make it white so that we can see it. I think I'm going to go a little bit more bold and a bit smaller. Then I want to make sure that I am centering everything. So I'm going to draw a little rectangle around here again. And with this selected now, I can use my align controls, and it's going to center it just within this box. So I'm going to go line there. I am also, actually that's a good selection, to do the same for the logo. So I'm going to drag a box all the way across, and I'm going to make sure that my logo is centered also. And I'm going to bump it up a little bit. Great. Next up, I'm going to go down. I'm going to do all of the body copy first, and then I'm going to go and do the headlines a little bit differently. Let's see. Let's get this regular. I want to center this. Let's make this white. Make this box a little bit wider too. Great. Pull this up and I think everything's still looking a little bit big, so I'm going to space that out. I'm also going to bring up my type window, which I think is in here. If you do not have it, you should be able to bring up your character and paragraph windows from the window control here. I'm just going to put them together. And this is going to allow me to get a bit more precise. So let's see, I'm going to track this out a little bit with the leading, make it a little bit bigger. Whoa, too big. Maybe 9. It was feeling a little bit cramped there before. Again, I'm going to center this. It's a little bit high there. Looking pretty good. Okay, and I think the last of the things that I want to be in Open Sans is going to be this button. And I'm going to make that a bold button. I'm going to make this a bit bigger. I think I can go even more bold. Let's go extra bold. And I'm going to make sure this is centered. From there, I'm going to select my button. If I hold down Command and click on the thumbnail, it's going to give me the selection there. And I can just make sure that this fits. Looks like my button's a little small though. So I'm going to make this a bit bigger of a button. And, oops, don't want to put text in that button that much. Finally, I want to make this a bit white. This process will obviously be a little bit different based on your own content. But I just want to go and refine. I want one font for the body, and I want one font for more of the eye-catching kind of things. So I'm going to go now here, and I'm going to use Georgia. This is a web-safe font that is cursive. I'm going to use that. Let's see. I think it might be bold italic even. Great. And now I'm going to make sure that I am centered. Looking good. And it's still a little big, but it gets the job done. Let's see. Next up, I'm going to work on these 3 labels right here. These should be in my page content folder. And I'm going to select them all and change them all to Georgia. Looking good. I'm going to make them a little bit smaller as well. And I'm going to make sure that they are all centered. Because what I'm going to want to do is basically just line them up underneath each of their 3 icons. As ever, I can select multiple of them, and I can use my align controls. I want to make sure that everything's lined up evenly. So we're looking pretty good. I might even put the shapes and these circles all into a folder. I'm going to call these bullet points, even though they're not quite. I'm going to do that because now I can select the whole document and I can make sure that that folder is centered. Great. Although it looks like I actually got one of my rectangular, my buttons was in here, which it should not be. Make sure that that is centered again. Cool. Okay, last but almost not least, I'm going to change this guy as well to be pretty similar. Looks like it's a bit too big. Again, I'm going to make sure that that is centered. All right, we're looking pretty good now. I'm going to save. Last thing that I need to clean up a little bit is this footer, which isn't quite a footer yet. So I'm going to make the type here. I'm going to make that a bit smaller because it's a footer. And I'm going to make it this same gray that we've been using, just so it's a bit smaller. That's kind of hard to see. Last but not least, I'm going to bring in these social media icons that I linked to in the assignment, and I'm going to put these down here. These we will link up later when we are in Dreamweaver. And I'm going to make sure that those are centered. That text doesn't seem centered at all. There we go. Very good. These are now both, should be in footer. Could probably do a little bit more cleaning up of both my fonts and of my layers and everything, but this should give you a good sense of the desired end goal. So obviously yours is going to look a bit different, different colors, different images. You're welcome to use different typefaces, download whatever you want from Google Fonts, stick with something that we can host or a web-safe font, but otherwise, this should be a pretty decent guide to follow. You're welcome to continue to refine your typography, obviously. And again, don't get too attached to all the details here because these are going to change a little bit when we export everything and bring it into Dreamweaver. This is more of our guide that when we're building in Dreamweaver, we're going to work towards this document to try and get everything to look as much like this as we can. So we want to focus on getting everything a bit polished in here until we are happy with it. And that is it.